The wind howled a mournful dirge, a constant companion to Silas in his isolated cabin. Years etched themselves onto his face, each winter carving new lines into skin already mapped with the harsh geography of the mountains. It wasn't just wrinkles, it was a network of tiny cracks, spider-webbing around his eyes and mouth, pale reminders of countless frost-bitten nights. Ice-cracked skin, a badge of honor and a testament to his resilience. He was a man sculpted by the cold, his silence as deep and impenetrable as the winter snowdrifts. Silas's cabin was a sanctuary, a small square of warmth and light against the vast, frozen wilderness. A single oil lamp cast a golden glow, painting the rough-hewn logs with dancing shadows. The light was precious, a beacon in the long, dark months, reflecting off the polished surfaces of his trapping tools and the worn pages of his few books. The only other sound besides the wind was the low, rhythmic crackle of the fire in the hearth. He preferred the solitude. People were trouble, messy, and unpredictable. The mountains, the animals, the changing seasons, these were constants he understood. He knew how to read the signs, how to survive. He needed nothing more than his traps, his rifle, and the unwavering flame of his lamp. Or so he thought until the blizzard descended, bringing with it an unexpected intrusion into his carefully ordered world. A world where the only roar he usually heard was that of a hungry bear, not the deep, unsettling rumble that sometimes seemed to emanate from the earth itself. A rumble he tried to ignore. The unsettling rumble was quickly overtaken by the rising scream of the wind. The blizzard, a white-furred beast, descended with terrifying speed. One moment the world was a monochrome painting of gray and white. The next it was a swirling vortex of snow, obliterating all sense of direction. The flakes were like tiny needles, stinging his exposed skin, finding purchase in the cracks already there. Silas knew these storms. He'd weathered countless blizzards in his time. He secured the shutters, banking snow against the base of the cabin to insulate it further. The lamp flickered, threatened by the force of the wind pushing against the small glass window, but held steady, a defiant spark against the encroaching darkness. He added another log to the fire, the flames leaping higher, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. The wind howled louder, a banshee wail that seemed to penetrate the very bones. It rattled the door, testing its strength. Silas listened, his senses on high alert. He knew the power of a blizzard, the way it could disorient, freeze, and kill. It was a force to be respected, a reminder of nature's untamed power. He checked his rifle, ensuring it was loaded and ready, not against the storm itself, but against any creature driven to desperation by the weather. He settled into his chair, a worn leather seat that had molded to his frame over the years. The fire crackled, the lamp glowed, and the wind screamed. Silas closed his eyes, finding a strange sort of peace in the chaos. He was safe for now, but the night was young and the storm was far from over. The subterranean rumble, though faint, was still there, a low thrumming beneath the surface of the storm's fury, an ominous counterpoint to the wind's high-pitched cry. Just as the fire began to lull him into a state of drowsy vigilance, a sound cut through the storm's relentless roar. It wasn't the wind nor the rumble from below. It was a distinct, desperate knocking, a rhythmic pounding against the thick wooden door barely audible above the howling gale. Silas frowned. Visitors were rare enough in the summer, but during a blizzard. Unheard of, he hesitated, his hand instinctively tightening around the rifle at his side. Who would be out in this weather, and why would they seek him out? The knocking persisted, more frantic now, laced with a note of urgency that even Silas couldn't ignore. He rose from his chair, the lamp casting his long shadow across the room. He approached the door cautiously, peering through the small, frost-covered window. He could see nothing but a swirling white abyss. He unlatched the heavy bolt, the metal cold against his calloused fingers. He pulled the door open a crack, bracing himself against the force of the wind. A blast of icy air rushed into the cabin, extinguishing the lamp's defiant flame and sending a shiver down his spine. And then he saw him, A figure collapsed against the doorway, half buried in the snow. A man barely conscious, his face a mask of ice. His exposed skin was a horrifying patchwork of red and white, laced with the telltale cracks of severe frostbite. He was barely alive. Silas knew in that instant that he had a choice to make. A choice that would shatter the carefully constructed solitude he had cultivated for so long. The subterranean rumble seemed to grow louder, as if echoing the turmoil within him. The choice, though unwelcome, was swift. Silas, despite his gruff exterior, wasn't a monster. He heaved the stranger inside, the man's body stiff and unyielding as a frozen log. The weight was considerable, and Silas grunted with the effort. He managed to drag him away from the door, kicking it shut against the renewed onslaught of the storm. Relighting the lamp was a struggle, his fingers clumsy with cold. But finally the small flame flickered back to life, casting a weak but welcome glow on the scene. He laid the stranger on the floor near the fire, his face now visible in the lamplight. It was even worse than he'd initially thought. The blue tinge of hypothermia was stark, and the cracks in his skin looked like fissures in a frozen lake. Silas worked quickly, stripping off the stranger's wet clothes, replacing them with blankets he usually reserved for his own bed. He chafed the man's limbs, trying to restore circulation. He had some experience with frostbite, a grim necessity in his line of work. He knew the delicate balance between warming too quickly and not warming enough. He found a small flask of whiskey, his emergency supply. He managed to pry the stranger's jaw open and trickle a small amount down his throat. The man coughed, a weak, rattling sound, but swallowed. A flicker of life returned to his eyes. Silas knew the next few hours would be critical. He settled in beside the stranger, feeding the fire and monitoring his condition. The wind continued to howl, and the subterranean rumble persisted, a low, ominous counterpoint to the stranger's shallow breathing. As the lamp glowed softly, Silas watched, his weathered face etched with a mixture of concern and grim determination. He had made his choice, and now he would see it through. Days bled into each other, marked only by the shifting patterns of light and shadow in the cabin. The blizzard raged on, trapping them both within its icy embrace. The stranger remained mostly silent, drifting in and out of consciousness. Silas tended to him with a quiet efficiency, his movements economical and precise. He cleaned the frostbitten skin with a mixture of snowmelt and herbs, his touch surprisingly gentle despite his rough exterior. The lamp glow illuminated the stranger's face, revealing the slow, agonizing process of healing. The cracks in his skin, though still visible, began to knit together, leaving behind angry red lines. Communication was minimal. Silas wasn't one for idle chatter, and the stranger was too weak to speak much. A nod of the head, a grunt of acknowledgement, these were the extent of their conversations. But there was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond forged in the crucible of the storm. Silas saw a flicker of gratitude in the stranger's eyes, a silent thank you for his unexpected kindness. The cabin became a sanctuary, a haven of warmth and light in a world of ice and darkness. The fire roared, the lamp glowed, and the stranger slowly recovered, but the subterranean rumble never ceased. It was a constant reminder of something else, something lurking beneath the surface, a threat that even the blizzard couldn't mask. Silas found himself listening for it, his senses heightened, his unease growing with each passing day. He couldn't shake the feeling that the storm and the stranger were just the beginning of something far more significant, something connected to the earth itself. Finally, the storm began to abate. The wind subsided, the snow softened, and a pale sun peeked through the clouds. The stranger, though still gaunt, was on his feet. He moved slowly, testing his strength, but his eyes held a newfound spark of vitality. The lamp glow caught the faint lines that still marred his face, a permanent reminder of his brush with death. The cracks, though healed, remained like a subtle roadmap of his suffering. He approached Silas, his gaze direct and unwavering. "I owe you my life," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Silas shrugged, uncomfortable with the sentiment. "Just glad you're alive," he mumbled, turning away to tend the fire. The stranger persisted. "My name is Liam. I won't forget what you've done for me, Silas, I promise you that." Liam spent the day regaining his strength, helping Silas with chores around the cabin. There was a quiet camaraderie between them, a mutual respect that transcended words. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape, Liam prepared to leave. "I need to get back to civilization," he explained. "There's someone waiting for me." Silas nodded, understanding without asking. He knew the pull of the outside world, even if he himself preferred the solitude of the mountains. He watched as Liam walked away, his figure disappearing into the gathering twilight. The subterranean rumble seemed to fade with him, replaced by an unsettling silence. Silas was alone again, but something had shifted. The world felt different. The lamp glow seemed a little dimmer, the shadows a little deeper. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that their paths would cross again. The seasons turned as they always did. Spring melted the snow, painting the mountainsides with vibrant greens and blues. Summer brought long days and the buzzing of insects. Autumn blazed with fiery colors before surrendering to the inevitable return of winter. Silas continued his life as before, trapping, hunting, and tending to his cabin. The memory of Liam faded, becoming just another ghost in the landscape of his past. He almost forgot about the subterranean rumble, too. The mountains were old, after all. They shifted and groaned. It was just the sound of the earth settling, he told himself, nothing to worry about. The lamp glow continued to be his only companion during the long, dark nights. Years passed. The faint cracks in Silas's skin deepened, mirroring the fissures in the mountains themselves. He grew older, more weathered, more set in his ways. The world outside his cabin changed. He heard whispers of a town springing up in the valley below, drawn by the promise of riches buried beneath the earth. He paid it little mind. One day, a traveling salesman arrived at his cabin, seeking shelter from a sudden rainstorm. He was a garrulous fellow, full of news and gossip. He spoke of the mine, of the wealth it was bringing to the region, of the strong, capable foreman who had arrived from the north and whipped the operation into shape. "They say he's got ice in his veins," the salesman chuckled, "but he knows those mountains like the back of his hand. Saved them a fortune already with his unconventional methods." Silas listened, his interest piqued despite himself. The salesman went on, describing the foreman's appearance. A scar on his cheek, a quiet demeanor, and faint lines around his eyes like cracks in the skin. Silas felt a jolt of recognition. Could it be? The lamp glow in his memory flickered, illuminating a face he thought he had forgotten. The subterranean rumble, long dormant, began to stir once more. The rain eventually stopped, and the salesman, oblivious to the turmoil he had stirred within Silas, continued on his way. Silas watched him go, his mind racing. He tried to dismiss the salesman's words as mere coincidence, but the image of Liam's frostbitten face, illuminated by the lamp glow, was burned into his memory. The cracks in the skin, it had to be him. He spent the next few days in a state of restless unease. He found himself drawn to the valley below, towards the town that had sprung up around the mine. He told himself he was just curious, but deep down, he knew he had to see for himself. He had to know if the foreman was indeed Liam, the stranger he had rescued from the blizzard. The town was a chaotic jumble of tents, shacks, and hastily constructed buildings. The air was thick with the smell of cold dust and the sounds of hammering and shouting. It was a far cry from the peaceful solitude of his mountain cabin. He felt like an outsider, a ghost from a forgotten time. He made his way towards the mine, a gaping maw in the side of the mountain. Men streamed in and out, their faces grimy and exhausted. He scanned their faces, searching for a familiar one, and then he saw him. Standing near the entrance, barking orders with a quiet authority, was a man with a scar on his cheek and faint lines around his eyes. It was Liam. He was older, harder, but there was no mistaking him. Their eyes met across the distance, and a flicker of recognition passed between them. The subterranean rumble, which had been growing steadily louder, now resonated with an almost deafening intensity. Silas knew with a chilling certainty that something terrible was about to happen. The mountains were about to claim their due. He didn't have long to wait. The earth, it seemed, had been holding its breath for years, gathering its strength for a final, devastating exhale. The ground beneath Silas's feet trembled. The air filled with a low, guttural growl, a sound that resonated deep within his bones. It was the mountain itself screaming in protest. Then the mine collapsed. A cloud of dust erupted from the entrance, blotting out the sun. The ground shook violently, throwing men to their knees. The screams of panic mingled with the roar of collapsing rock, creating a cacophony of terror. The subterranean rumble transformed into a deafening roar, a monstrous bellow that seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality. Silas stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known this was coming, had felt it in his bones for years. But the reality was far more terrifying than anything he could have imagined. He saw Liam, standing near the collapsed entrance, his face a mask of shock and horror. The scar on his cheek stood out starkly against his pale skin, and the faint lines around his eyes seemed to deepen, as if the mountain itself was etching its anger onto his face. Without hesitation, Liam sprang into action. He began shouting orders, organizing the frantic miners into a semblance of order. He knew what to do, how to assess the damage, how to begin the desperate search for survivors. The lamp glow from the scattered lanterns cast long, distorted shadows, creating a scene of nightmarish chaos. Silas watched, a strange mixture of admiration and dread washing over him. He knew in that moment that Liam's promise to repay him was about to be fulfilled, but at what cost? The mountain was unforgiving, and it rarely offered second chances. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to breathe. The smell of crushed rock and cold dust stung Silas's nostrils. He watched as Liam directed men to shore up the entrance, their movements frantic and desperate. Time was running out. Dozens of miners were trapped inside, buried beneath tons of rubble. He saw the fear in their eyes, the raw, primal terror of being trapped underground. The lamp glow, once a comforting beacon, now cast an eerie light on their ashen faces, highlighting the desperation in their expressions. The subterranean roar, though diminished, still echoed through the valley, a constant reminder of the mountain's power. Silas knew he couldn't stand by and watch. He had spent his life navigating the treacherous terrain of the mountains, reading the signs of impending danger. He knew the mountain's moods, its strengths and weaknesses. He might be old, but his knowledge was still valuable. He approached Liam, who was barking orders to a group of men struggling to clear a path through the debris. "I can help," Silas said, his voice raspy but firm. Liam turned, his eyes widening in surprise. "Silas, what are you doing here?" "I know these mountains," Silas replied. "I know how they move. I can help you find a way through." Liam hesitated for a moment, his gaze searching Silas's face. He saw the determination in his eyes, the unwavering resolve that had sustained him through countless winters. He knew that Silas was telling the truth. He also knew that he couldn't afford to turn down any help, no matter how unlikely the source. "All right," Liam said, his voice tight with urgency. "Follow me, but stay close. It's not safe in there." The subterranean rumble grew louder, anticipating the next move. The mountain was far from done. Liam led the way, his lamp casting a flickering beam into the darkness. The entrance to the mine was a chaotic jumble of splintered timbers and jagged rocks. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. The subterranean roar was now a constant presence, a low, menacing hum that vibrated through the very ground they walked on. Silas followed close behind, his senses on high alert. He could feel the instability of the mountain, the subtle shifts and groans that indicated imminent collapse. He pointed out stress fractures in the rock face, warning Liam of potential hazards. "The ice," Silas said, his voice barely audible above the roar. "The way they've been digging, it's weakened the ice formations. That's what caused the collapse." Liam nodded grimly. He had suspected as much. He had warned the mine owners about the dangers of digging too deep, too fast, but they had ignored his warnings, driven by greed and the promise of quick riches. Now their recklessness had cost lives. They moved deeper into the mine, the lamp glow revealing a scene of utter devastation. Tunnels had collapsed, burying miners beneath tons of rock. The air was thick with the cries of the injured and the moans of the dying. The scene was a nightmarish tableau of chaos and despair. Liam, despite the horror of the situation, remained calm and focused. He organized the rescue teams, directing them to the areas where survivors were most likely to be found. His knowledge of ice and cold proved invaluable, allowing him to predict where the safest passages might be. The faint cracks on his face seemed to glow in the lamplight, a testament to his own brush with death and a reminder of the debt he owed to Silas. The mountain, however, was not impressed by debts or promises. It was hungry, and it would not be denied. The deeper they ventured, the more treacherous the conditions became. The tunnels were narrow and unstable, threatening to collapse at any moment. The lamp glow revealed a labyrinth of twisted metal, shattered rock, and mangled bodies. The subterranean roar intensified, becoming a deafening cacophony that drowned out all other sounds. It was as if the mountain itself was trying to crush them, to bury them alive. Silas, despite his age, moved with a surprising agility. He used his tracking skills, honed over years of hunting in the mountains, to identify potential escape routes and to locate pockets of air where survivors might still be trapped. He read the subtle signs in the rock, the faint tremors that warned of impending collapse. He found a group of miners trapped behind a fallen beam, their faces blackened with coal dust, their eyes wide with terror. He worked quickly, using his axe to chop through the beam, freeing the trapped men. "Get out of here," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "The mountain's not stable." The miners, grateful for their rescue, scrambled to their feet and fled towards the entrance. Silas turned to Liam, his face grim. "We need to get out of here," he said. "It's going to collapse again." Liam nodded, his face etched with concern. "We're running out of time," he said, "but there are still miners trapped further in. We can't leave them." Silas knew that Liam was right. They couldn't abandon the remaining survivors, but he also knew that staying any longer was a death sentence. The mountain was about to unleash its fury, and they were trapped inside its belly. The lamp glow flickered ominously, as if sensing the impending doom. The subterranean rumble reached a crescendo, signaling the final act of this deadly drama. "How many are left?" Silas asked, his voice strained. Liam consulted a tattered piece of paper, his face grim. 6, maybe 7. They were working near the north shaft. It's the most unstable part of the mine. Silas nodded, his heart sinking. The north shaft was riddled with ice veins, weakened by the mining operations. It was a death trap waiting to happen. "We have to hurry," he said, "before it's too late." They pressed on, the tunnel narrowing until they were forced to crawl on their hands and knees. The air was thick with dust, making it difficult to breathe. The lamp glow revealed the jagged walls of the tunnel, the unstable rock threatening to collapse at any moment. The subterranean roar echoed around them, a constant reminder of the mountain's anger. They reached a fork in the tunnel, 2 paths leading into the darkness. Liam hesitated, unsure which way to go. Silas studied the rock face, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement or instability. "This way," he said, pointing to the left-hand tunnel. "I can feel it. There's a draft coming from that direction. It means there's an opening somewhere." They crawled into the left-hand tunnel, the air growing colder with each step. The lamp glow revealed a sheet of ice covering the walls, shimmering in the dim light. The ice was thin and brittle, cracked and weakened by the mining operations. Silas knew that it wouldn't hold for long. Suddenly the ground beneath them trembled. The tunnel shook violently, sending a shower of rocks tumbling down from the ceiling. The subterranean roar reached a deafening crescendo. The mountain was about to unleash its fury, and they were trapped in its heart. Liam and Silas exchanged a look of grim determination. This was it, their final stand against the mountain's wrath. The ice cracks on Liam's face seemed to glow as he prepared for the worst. In the brief lull between tremors, a section of the ice wall cracked, revealing a narrow passage leading into the darkness. A faint glimmer of light flickered from within, offering a sliver of hope in the face of certain death. Liam and Silas locked eyes. In that shared gaze, a silent understanding passed between them. It was a recognition of their shared past, of the blizzard and the cabin and the debt that had brought them together. It was also a recognition of the present, of the imminent danger and the desperate need to save the remaining miners. No words were spoken, but none were needed. They both knew what had to be done. Liam nodded, his face grim but determined. He pointed towards the passage. "Go," he said, his voice barely audible above the subterranean roar. "I'll cover you." Silas hesitated for a moment, his gaze searching Liam's face. He saw the resolve in his eyes, the unwavering commitment to his duty. He knew that Liam wouldn't back down, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. With a sigh, Silas turned and crawled into the passage, the lamp glow casting his long shadow ahead of him. The passage was narrow and cramped, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. The air was cold and damp, and the smell of ozone filled his nostrils. He could feel the vibrations of the mountain all around him, the constant tremors that threatened to bring the entire tunnel crashing down. He pressed on, driven by the hope of finding survivors and the knowledge that Liam was counting on him. He knew that time was running out, that the mountain was about to unleash its final fury. But he also knew that he couldn't give up, not now, not ever. The memory of Liam's frost-bitten face, illuminated by the lamp glow in his cabin, spurred him onward, a reminder of the bond that had brought them together and the debt that he now had to repay. The subterranean rumble was almost deafening now, a constant threat that pushed Silas onward. As Silas crawled through the narrow passage, Liam faced his own challenges. The tremors intensified, causing rocks to fall from the ceiling. He braced himself against the walls, trying to keep the tunnel from collapsing. The subterranean roar was deafening, threatening to overwhelm his senses. He remembered his near-death experience in the blizzard, the way the ice had clung to his skin, the excruciating pain of the frostbite. He remembered the subtle shifts and groans of the ice formations, the way they responded to the slightest changes in temperature and pressure. It was that knowledge, gained from the brink of death, that now guided his decisions. He noticed a pattern in the tremors, a subtle rhythm that indicated the mountain was about to shift in a specific direction. He realized that the main support beam of the tunnel was about to give way, sealing off the passage that Silas had just entered. Without hesitation, he grabbed his axe and began hacking at the support beam, weakening it further. It was a risky move, one that could bring the entire tunnel crashing down on his head. But he knew that it was the only way to save Silas and the trapped miners. The lamp glow illuminated his face, highlighting the sweat and grime that covered his skin. The faint cracks around his eyes seemed to glow with an eerie intensity, a testament to his past suffering and his unwavering determination. He swung his axe with all his might, the blows echoing through the tunnel. The subterranean roar intensified, as if the mountain was screaming in protest. He knew that time was running out. Meanwhile, further down the passage, Silas reached a small chamber, and there they were. 6 miners huddled together, their faces blackened with cold dust, their eyes wide with fear. They were alive, but barely. The lamp light danced over them. "We have to get out of here now," Silas shouted, urging the miners to their feet. They stumbled towards the passage, their movements slow and hesitant. Silas pushed them forward, his voice laced with urgency. "Go, go. Go." He heard a deafening crack behind him, followed by a roar of collapsing rock. The main support beam had finally given way. The passage began to collapse, sealing off their escape route. Liam appeared at the entrance to the chamber, his face blackened with soot, his eyes wild with urgency. "Silas, get them out of here. I'll hold it as long as I can." Silas hesitated, torn between his desire to help Liam and his responsibility to the miners. He knew that Liam was sacrificing himself, buying them time to escape. "Go, Silas, don't waste my sacrifice," Liam shouted, his voice almost lost in the subterranean roar. With a heavy heart, Silas obeyed. He led the miners towards the exit, the ground trembling beneath their feet. They scrambled over piles of rubble, their lungs burning with dust and smoke. They reached the entrance to the mine just as the final collapse began. The mountain roared its defiance, burying the mine beneath tons of rock. The town watched in horror as the entrance disappeared beneath a cloud of dust. The lamp glow faded, and the subterranean roar became a deafening silence. All were safe except one. They had escaped, but Liam was gone. Silas felt a pang of guilt and regret, a heavy weight in his chest. He had repaid his debt to Liam, but at what cost? The memory of his ice-cracked skin burned into Silas's mind. But as the dust settled and the silence descended, a flicker of defiance ignited within Silas. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't let Liam die. He remembered the blizzard, the blue tinge of his skin, the faint cracks that had marked him as a survivor. He remembered the silent gratitude in his eyes, the promise to repay his debt. And he remembered the warmth of the lamp glow in his cabin, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. He turned back towards the collapsed entrance, ignoring the shouts of the other miners. "Silas, no. It's too dangerous." But Silas wouldn't listen. He was driven by a force stronger than fear, stronger than reason. He was driven by a sense of obligation, a deep-seated belief that he couldn't abandon a man who had sacrificed himself for others. He began clawing at the rubble, his hands bleeding and raw. The other miners watched in disbelief, their faces etched with a mixture of pity and admiration. They knew that Silas was on a fool's errand, that Liam was almost certainly dead. But they also knew that they couldn't stop him. As he dug deeper into the rubble, he heard a faint sound, a muffled cough. It was a sound that filled him with hope, a sign that Liam might still be alive. He dug faster, his movements frantic and desperate. He had to reach him before it was too late. The mountain remained silent, but Silas could feel its presence, its malevolent energy. He knew that it wouldn't give up easily, that it would continue to fight until the very end. He finally broke through a layer of rubble, revealing a small pocket of air, and there, huddled against the wall, was Liam. He was alive, but barely. His face was covered in soot, his clothes were torn, and his eyes were glazed with pain. But he was alive. The lamp glow of Silas's lantern illuminated Liam's cracked skin, a testament to endurance. "Liam," Silas cried, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm here, I'm going to get you out of here." His own skin, ice-cracked from years of cold, was a matching testament. He wasn't leaving Liam behind. "I can't move," Liam groaned, his voice weak. "My leg's trapped." Silas assessed the situation quickly. A large rock had pinned Liam's leg, crushing it beneath its weight. He knew that moving the rock would be dangerous, potentially triggering another collapse, but he also knew that they had no other choice. "Hold on," Silas said, bracing himself against the wall. "This is going to hurt." He used all his strength to lever the rock, inching it upwards. Liam cried out in pain, his face contorted in agony. But he gritted his teeth and bore it, knowing that his life depended on Silas's efforts. Finally, the rock shifted, freeing Liam's leg. Silas helped him to his feet, but Liam could barely stand. His leg was badly injured and he couldn't put any weight on it. "I can't walk," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll carry you," Silas replied, without hesitation. He hoisted Liam onto his back, his muscles straining with the effort. He knew that it was going to be a long and difficult journey, but he was determined to get them both out of there alive. They began to make their way back through the rubble, their progress slow and arduous. The mountain continued to rumble, threatening to collapse around them. The lamp glow flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. They reached a section of the tunnel that had completely collapsed, blocking their path. Silas studied the debris, his mind racing. He needed to find another way out, and he needed to find it fast. Liam, despite his pain, offered his expertise. "Remember what I said about the ice formations," he said. "There might be a weak spot near the surface. Look for it." Silas scanned the rubble, his eyes searching for any sign of ice. And then he saw it, a faint glimmer of light reflecting off a patch of ice near the top of the collapsed tunnel. "There," he shouted, pointing towards the light. "I think I've found something." The subterranean rumble increased, pushing them onward. They had to get out, now. Working together, Silas and Liam began to dig towards the patch of ice. Silas used his axe to chip away at the rubble, while Liam, despite his injured leg, offered guidance, pointing out the most unstable sections of the tunnel. The subterranean rumble was almost deafening now, a constant reminder of the impending doom. Finally, they broke through the surface, emerging into the fresh air and sunlight. They had made it. The town erupted in cheers as Silas and Liam emerged from the rubble, exhausted but alive. The miners rushed towards them, their faces filled with gratitude. They had been hailed as heroes, their bravery and selflessness celebrated by all. The lamp glow of their rescue was a beacon for all to see. Silas, uncomfortable with the attention, simply nodded and helped Liam to a nearby wagon. He was more concerned with Liam's well-being than with the accolades of the town. Liam, despite his injuries, managed a weak smile. "I told you I'd repay you," he said, his voice raspy. Silas simply shrugged, his usual taciturn self. "We're even," he said. The town celebrated for days, honoring Silas and Liam for their courage and sacrifice. They had saved the lives of 6 miners, and in doing so had brought hope and unity to a town that had been divided by greed and fear. The town, previously driven by the lure of the mine, now saw the true wealth in community and bravery. Even with celebration, Liam would never fully recover. The cracks in his skin, however, seemed more settled. The subdued roar was finally at peace, and so too would Silas soon be. Silas had returned to his cabin. A few weeks later, Silas received a visitor at his cabin. It was Liam, leaning heavily on a crutch. The town had offered him a hero's welcome, a life of ease and comfort, but Liam was restless. He couldn't stay. The mine was sealed, a tomb for the dreams of quick riches. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice quiet. "This place, it's not for me." Silas nodded, understanding without asking. He knew that Liam was a wanderer, a man marked by the ice and the mountains. He couldn't be contained by the confines of a town, no matter how grateful they were. "Where will you go?" Silas asked, breaking his usual silence. Liam shrugged. "I don't know, somewhere where the mountains are high and the air is cold." They stood in silence for a moment, the bond between them unspoken but palpable. Silas knew that he would probably never see Liam again, but he also knew that he would never forget him. Liam extended his hand. "Thank you, Silas," he said, his voice filled with gratitude, "for everything." Silas shook his hand, his grip firm. "Take care of yourself," he said, his voice gruff. Liam turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the trees. Silas watched him go, his heart filled with a strange mixture of sadness and peace. He knew that Liam was forever marked by the ice and the mine, but he also knew that he was a survivor, a man who could overcome any obstacle. The lamp glow in Silas's cabin seemed to dim as the light left his life once again. The roar was gone. He turned back to his cabin, his solitary life beckoning him once more. He was alone again, but he was no longer the same man. He had learned the value of connection, the importance of sacrifice, and the enduring power of hope. The town, once so foreign, now felt more familiar, more connected to his existence. Back in his cabin, Silas lit the lamp. The familiar glow cast dancing shadows on the walls, but tonight the shadows seemed different. They were no longer the shadows of solitude, but the shadows of memory, of connection, of shared experience. The lamp glow was no longer just a source of light, but a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a single act of kindness can make all the difference. He thought about Liam, about his frostbitten face, about his unwavering determination, about his selfless sacrifice. He realized that Liam had repaid his debt 1,000-fold, not just by saving the miners, but by showing him the true meaning of connection. He also understood now that the subterranean rumble wasn't just a sign of impending disaster, but a reminder of the power of the earth, the forces that shaped the mountains and the men who lived among them. It was a reminder of the bond that they shared, a bond forged in the face of death, a bond that would endure long after they were both gone. The cracks in Silas's skin seemed less prominent now, less a sign of isolation and more a roadmap of life. He finally understood that true strength wasn't about solitude, but about connection, about embracing the shared humanity that bound them all together. He sat in his chair, the lamp glow illuminating his weathered face. He was an old man marked by the cold and the mountains, but he was also a man who had learned the true meaning of kindness and connection, and that, he knew, was a treasure worth more than all the riches buried beneath the earth. The end.